I'm going to talk further about partnerships and the broad range of partnerships that are available to us. But first, just some notions about some of the tensions and balances that we need in partnerships. Individual versus institutional. It was a few years ago that Dr. Manuel Pena in the ALEC department surveyed all the research and cooperation that we had between Texas A&M and Mexico. There were he found over 100 collaborative activities with Mexico. Essentially, none of those were institutionally arranged partnerships. They were all faculty members on their own, finding their relationships and working individually with colleagues in Mexico, sometimes in ones and twos of collaboration. This is very, very valuable because it means that it reflects the depth of a faculty members or staff members, researchers, depth of interest in a partnership. It's led by them. It expresses their passion, expresses their interest, and it's not one of us organizing it for them. They're doing it themselves. So it really is a very high value, very high payoff type of relationship. And I think as we go forward, we want to continue to foster and promote those kinds of individual leadership. We've already heard some of the presentations already given reflected these individual efforts made by faculty. Then the other type, of course, are institutional partnerships, and very often they feed off one another. Sometimes individual partnerships lead to institutional partnerships. Sometimes institutional partnerships spawn individual partnerships. Internal versus external. Sometimes in our discussions today, we'll be talking about partnerships that are between donors and we who are providing the expertise for donors. Other times we're talking about partnerships among those of us who are supplying the expertise to donors. But as we look at those partnerships that are on the supply side, we need to be clear that we want very broad partnerships that are internal among the units of the Texas A&M system, not only here in College Station, but the research and extension centers, as well as very often other universities in the A&M system. There are 6 agriculture programs, I think, in the A&M system, and from time to time we've had very strong partnerships with components there, from Prairie View A&M, from Commerce, from West Texas A&M, from Stephenville, from Tarleton, and so on. Networking versus competition. I would say, at A&M, I think that there has been, in the past, a strong emphasis on who we know and our possible political clout and how we can get things done through a network that we generate, and have maybe prioritized that over sharpening our competitive ability. It really takes both. I came from a smaller school, like at Oregon State University here, where they really have to scramble to get what they get because they don't have the very sizable political clout. And as a result, it's all in the excellence of the proposal and their ability to compete. We need both of those, and I'm not saying we don't compete effectively. We just need to sharpen that competitive ability and complement that with our networking ability. Science, this should not be a choice between science and development, but interestingly enough, it often is. Over the past month, there have been numerous instances brought to my attention of development projects that lack the core science that is required to make a difference in people's lives. One example, a little bit further back than that, was the sponsorship by the Howard Buffett Foundation and the World Food Program to A&M to investigate the reasons that farmers can't sell their commodities, rice and wheat and maize, in African countries at the world market price. We went there. We went to these remote villages and discovered, not surprisingly, that their costs are far above the world market price for wheat, rice, maize, and corn because they have such really terrible technology that they're working with. Their yields are well less than a metric ton per hectare. Their labor costs are as much as 150 to 170 person days per year. They simply they don't have the benefit of the science that we should have. At the same time, in these same communities, or in these same countries, there are literally hundreds of development workers that are responsible for these development projects in these communities. I've quizzed a lot of them about their knowledge of agriculture. And there's barely an ounce of science among these NGOs out there. And I don't want to be too critical, but I'm saying that we really need to have science coupled with our ability to work with communities in development. And that's not happening. And incidentally, on the science side, the job is there as well. Very recently, I spoke with the new Director General of ILRI, the International Livestock Research Institute worldwide. He's moving from World Bank to take on his post in Nairobi, Kenya. He said the CGIAR too often are so focused on the science that they're not getting it out to communities. He said, we must. He said, I, as the new Director General of ILRI, will make an enormous effort to bring in the philosophy of development into the CGIAR and into ILRI. So it goes both ways. Solicited versus unsolicited. Just as we talk about our priorities and what we can do well, there's sort of a notion that if we gear up to produce and to deliver, that there will be an opportunity there. Well, sometimes that might be possible by giving unsolicited proposals, but that's really a hard route to go, because very rarely do donors jump for the opportunity to fund something that a supply side, that a supplier comes forward with. So we're going to need to work on both of those, on being able to respond to and to provide unsolicited proposals as well as the solicited proposals, because that's where the money is, basically. And finally, just if we are working with unsolicited proposals and even solicited, make sure that we have partners in country that are really leading this. It doesn't help very much. I don't know if Malcolm is still here. It doesn't help very much to go to USAID with an idea coming from a university or any entity in the U.S. without it having even first come from the host country. We really need to mobilize our partners in the host country to present the case, to present the need. If you don't have that, it's probably a non-starter. Really, I like, you'll find on our website Title 12. Title 12 is really the blueprint of the U.S. Congress for partnerships between land-grant universities and the federal government for international development. It's a very rich law, but it would take you a long time to study it. It's about 10 pages long. I invite you to go to the website and go through that law, because there's so many parts of it from which we could benefit. This is the first paragraph of the law, and it was written here at Texas A&M. When this law was revised in 2000, it was we, colleagues here at A&M, who wrote this law and got it introduced by Representative Kevin Brady. And this is now the law which authorizes the CGIAR, as well as the CRISP and the many other partnerships that we have with USAID. But this was the first time ever that the law spoke of partnerships. The United States should mobilize the capacities of land-grant universities, other eligible universities, and public and private partners of universities. That's the first time that the notion of partnership of the land grants with others to work with USAID. Here are some of the many types of partnerships that are available to us. Federal government, foundations, private firms, multilateral banks, and so on. I'm going to go through a few of those, but not necessarily through all of them, because it'll take too long. But these are some of the exciting areas, broad areas that we can partner. Next slide. Speaking first of the U.S. Agency for International Development, probably our most prominent and senior partner for international development. A point about USAID. Right now, I think that the portfolio of projects with U.S. universities is probably on the order of less than $50 million, I'm going to guess. Not sure. In 1984, it peaked at $850 million, awarded in 1 year to land-grant universities. At that time, there were 15,000 foreign students studying in the U.S. in agriculture, sponsored by USAID. Today, there are probably less than 100 graduate students sponsored by USAID in the U.S. So there's been a big change. So the other federal offices with which we work are Department of Agriculture, Department of Defense, Peace Corps, Commerce, and others. Just to focus a little bit on USDA, this is one of the most exciting areas that we work right now. Probably few of you know that A&M has owned something like 15,000 tons of non-fat dry milk at one time, or 20,000 tons of soybeans. We did that in order to, through the Food for Progress, we took ownership of this surplus commodity, then sold it on the market and used those funds for the Guatemala and Indonesia projects. We were the first U.S. university to do that. And we began that about 10 years ago. More recently, Cornell has called us and said, could you please tell us how you do this? Could you get your people together with our risk management people to explain that it's okay to own these commodities for a period of time? One of the other features of our current partnerships is that we here at Texas A&M are the primary advocates for the authorization of the Borlaug Fellows Program in the U.S. Farm Bill, as well as the FAS internships. We wrote that legislation, and we're the ones who continually advocate for it through our congressional delegation. Next one. Some of you are aware of the recent advances with our partnership with the Department of Defense. We just awarded projects in Afghanistan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Southern Sudan. Those are all initiated by Department of Defense, although Department of State is now taking over the Congo and Southern Sudan. We might just skip to the next to last slide. Okay, keep going. Then okay, this is CGIR, you've already seen that. Just keep going. Foundations. These are all places that we have current partnerships. Stop. Okay, keep going. Okay, global coffee. Okay, I'm very interested in this. Just to let you know, we're working very closely with the coffee roasters worldwide. Moving toward a checkoff system where we will be managing the research to improve specialty coffee worldwide. Green Mountain Coffee, a few others have put in money to get us started. That's now at about $300,000 that we're spending this year in getting the initiative underway. We hope by January to have in place a checkoff on all washed Arabica coffee coming into the U.S. at about 0.25 cents a pound, which will provide a very sizable fund for research if we get that finally through. Okay, keep going. You can go ahead. I'll talk about that later. Keep going. Okay, keep going. Okay, stop there. From all of those, this is going to be on the website, so you can go look at who these potential partners are. We need to review them. We'll look at those potential partners for the future. But here are the ones that I wanted to sort of prioritize for near-term thinking. First of all, I think that through the process that we're going through now, we're looking at where are our strengths, where can we deliver, and so on. We'll need to adapt those interest areas to the RFAs and RFPs when they start coming out. They will rarely look, these invitations will rarely look like what we think we do best or the way we would conceive it. But nevertheless, we can adapt to meet their needs. I think there's probably also, when we choose 2 or 3 key priority areas, to actually try the unsolicited proposal route with 1 or more foundations. If it's carefully done and we cultivate the relationship with 1 or more foundations, we can probably find the opportunity somewhere along the line to support that. The third one of these is, for me, one of the most exciting areas right now. Over the last 2 years, a venture capital firm has visited us several times. It's called the Kirchner Food Security Group, on which a member of our Board of Regents sits as a member of the board, suggesting that the best way to advance technology in developing countries is to support ventures that have private interest of the U.S. linked to the private interest of developing country farmers. And the basic proposition is, say, for these farmers who are getting less than a ton of rice per hectare, link their success somehow to a venture capital firm who will also earn from the same proposition. We already have some ideas of how that might happen. But right now, as you may, if you listen to the news, private firms and venture capital are sitting upon billions and billions of dollars. They're afraid of the U.S. marketplace right now, and they're looking for places to put that money. And interestingly, we're getting more and more inquiries about that. A new private capital firm funded by Hyatt Hotels of $50 to $75 million is being placed in the hands of a group that we've been working with in the past, and they've invited us to be their partner in these venture capital type activities. We need to adapt our interest areas to current projects. As I said, they're just some newly funded projects. There may be a possibility of adapting what we feel that we can do well to those current projects. Here is one organization you've probably not heard much about. I'm very excited about working with them. The International Fund for Agricultural Development, the IFAD, or IFAD, is the last resort donor to the poorest countries in the world. After World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and the other organizations, United Nations, find that they have cases that they really can't help, IFAD is the donor of last resort. IFAD is looking for partnerships. The president of IFAD has been to A&M. He's a very strong friend of Texas A&M. Kanayo Nwanzi, former head of WARDA, West Africa Rice Development Association. And he, last year when Julie and several of us were in Rome, again, he reiterated that he needs partnerships with U.S. universities to advance IFAD programs. So I think that's an area. Finally, in the Title 12 area, there's much in that law that's never been tapped. We've authorized the law that sets up the opportunity to go back to Congress for appropriated funds to advance elements of this law. We've done very little with that. We've sort of left it up to USAID to decide which parts they want to implement, and there's not much that they've chosen to implement with U.S. universities. But if we take that authorization, link it to our capacity to appropriate with our congressional delegation, with partners like Virginia Tech and others, I think that we could probably pull off some advances in that area as well. Thank you.